أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. So we as human beings make a lot of claims. Among the many claims that we make is the claim of love. We claim to love a lot of things. When we seek the path of so-called spirituality, we are claiming to love something greater than ourselves. But like the great poet said, love is like a lawsuit. It requires evidence. What is the evidence of love? What is the direct consequence of this powerful emotion? Think for a moment about human love. What happens when someone is in love with another person? That person will desire nothing more than to serve, please, and be close to the one that they love. And this service is not motivated by begrudging obligation, but rather a deep inner drive born directly out of that love. Love speaks for itself. When you love someone, you do what pleases them. And your greatest joy is in pleasing and serving the one you love. It's an honor to serve the one you love. Imagine for a moment that you're in the presence of a famous person. So you're walking down in Hollywood or something, and you come across, okay, I'm just going to use the example of Kobe. You may or may not care about that, but you see Kobe, and how do people act when they see a famous person or someone they really love? What they do is they go up to them, can I get you something? You know, like, you know, if you're in the presence of a king or you're in the presence of a celebrity, it's let me serve you. Can I get you something? Can I just get you a cup of water? Can I tie your shoe? Right? And then you'll go home and you'll tell everyone that you tied Kobe's shoe. Now you may not care about Kobe, but you understand the sentiment here. There is an honor in serving the one you love. There is tashrif. And it is only once the love is gone or weakened that serving that person goes from being an honor to just being a burden. It goes from tashrif to only taklif. Sadly, our claim of love for God is like this. To claim spirituality, we are claiming love. But love of what? To claim spirituality without obedience to the one you claim to love is really just worship of the self. It's just like another form of high. This is why people will run after the type of spirituality that gives them a buzz and abandon a deed the moment it stops providing the buzz. The question we have to ask ourselves is, are we worshiping God or are we worshiping the spiritual high, the buzz? If you really want to know what you love, look at what you obey. Look at what you serve. Look at what you strive for. Remember that our actions are just external manifestations of our inner image, of the image of the heart. How we act is dictated by what we love. It is dictated by what is filling our heart. Remember that what you love is what you obey, and what you obey is an indication of what you truly love. So, be careful what you love. And everyone loves something, and so everyone obeys something. The question is, what do you or I love most? Because that is what we will obey most. If it's another person that you love most, that will be what you obey most. If it's the image in front of people, your actions will be dictated by what will provide you with the best image. If it's money that you love most, you will sacrifice haram and halal to make more of it. If it's getting married that you love most, and people tell you, for example, that you won't get married if you wear hijab, then you won't wear hijab. Remember that we are outside, and what we are outside is a reflection of what we are and what we love inside. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, قُلْ كُلٌّ يَعْمَلُ عَلَى شَاكِلَتِهِ. Now this ayah, I'm going to translate it, and then I'm going to talk about, there are different levels of meaning to this ayah that scholars have talked about. Very deep message here. The translation is that, say to the Prophet ﷺ, everyone acts according to shakilati. So shakilati is the inner image. So you will act the way you are inside. So you will act outside the way you are inside. And if you actually look at the definition of khuluq, the definition of khuluq, which is usually translated as manners, the definition of khuluq is this: هيئة راسخة في النفس تصدر عنها العمل والأقوال بسهولة بدون تكلف. What this means is it's an internal or engraved entity inside of you that manifests itself in your sayings and in your doings without any kind of like striving. You don't have to try hard. It's just it's the way you act immediately. It's kind of your knee-jerk reaction. And what that knee-jerk reaction, the way you act, is a manifestation of what you are engraved inside. So your actions are dictated by this inner image. But there's like a deeper level that Ibn Qayyim rahimahullah talks about in his station of irada. Irada means what you want, what you strive for, what you seek. And he says that you'll actually be inside, you'll take on the form of what you seek, of what you want. So if what you want is something low, if what you want is just the dunya and something low, that's the form that you take internally. You become that way. And if what you want and what you seek is something lofty and something great, then that's the form that you take internally. And so what he says, and in describing, for example, the meaning of the word, one of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's attributes is al-akhir. And we know that this means the end, the last, right? The end, al-akhir and al-awwal. Al-akhir, one of the understandings of this attribute, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be our final irada, our last and final irada. So when we seek a degree, okay, we seek, if someone comes and asks you, what do you want? What do you want from life? What do you seek? And you might say, okay, I seek a certain degree. I want to graduate from college. Okay, what after? Then you get there, then what? Now I want a good job, that's what I want. But then once you get there, then what? Okay, I want to make a lot of money, I want a big car. I want a big house, I want a nice car. Once you get to these things, there's always an end. There's always an end to these things because these are limited things. And so what we should do is make the final, our final and last irada, our final and last thing that we seek should be al-akhir, should be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we cannot separate love from worship. And when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the purpose of our creation, He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. So we go through this life, and people ask this question all the time. Why am I here? What am I doing? Where am I going? Where did I come from? These are questions that you ask if you're awake, right? If you're paying attention. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers this question for us in the Quran, and He says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I have not created jinn and human beings for any other purpose, for any other reason, except ubudiyya, except to fulfill ubudiyya to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So then the question is, what is ubudiyya? Do we not need to know what is our purpose of creation? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us it's ubudiyya. When explaining what is the meaning of ubudiyya, scholars such as Ibn Qayyim and Ibn Taymiyyah say that ubudiyya has two parts. Thaman al-mahabba, that's the first part. Thaman al-mahabba, the perfection of love. Along with thaman, so you have the perfection of love, مع تمام الطاعة and المذلة. So this means the perfection of love along with the perfection of humility and obedience. That is ubudiyyah. So to fulfill our purpose, we have to have both love and obedience. There is no ibadah without love. Therefore, there is no fulfillment of our purpose without love, without filling our heart with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So my advice to you and to me is guard your heart. Be careful of what enters your heart. Be careful of what fills your heart. Because your heart is very holy ground. There's something very holy about the heart. The heart is the seat of divine love and experience. None of us can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with our physical eyes, right? We can't see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only with the heart that you can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is only with the heart. And there's a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam where he says that in this world there are vessels. And the vessels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the hearts of the salihin. That in the heart is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be received. But think about this. You would never invite a king into a dirty house, because a king does not enter a dirty house. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the gifts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the nearness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not enter a dirty heart. So if we want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our heart, and if we want to be and to fulfill the purpose of our creation, to fulfill ubudiyyah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we have to clean our hearts. We have to guard our hearts and be careful what it is that's filling our hearts. We have to be careful of what type of ilah we carry in our hearts. I want to share one thing with you, and I want, inshallah, us to ponder on this. When the heart is cleaned of anything that competes with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something really amazing happens. Everything that the person now loves will be through, by, and because of Allah. And then you will be left loving only what Allah loves and not loving what Allah does not love. Once this happens, obedience is a direct consequence. Because your love is in line with Allah, what Allah loves. And this is why there's a very beautiful dua where we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allahumma inni urid an la urid illa ma turid. Oh Allah, I seek, I want, that I do not want except what you want. That's all we want. Oh Allah, I want that I do not want except what you want. That is the heart that's cleaned of anything competing with the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with any ilah competing with the only ilah. La ilaha illallah. Consider this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, in talking about the nearness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the hadith Qudsi, He tells us that the abd, the slave, does not do anything more endearing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala other than the fara'id. The fara'id are first, the obligations. Those are the things which Allah loves most. And when that abd continues to do those things and then does the nawafil, the supererogatory, the extra prayers, the extra fasts, that person continues to do those things until something amazing happens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, until I love that servant. So how do we get the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? We focus on the fara'id first, and then we add the nawafil, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves that servant. And once that happens, now this is amazing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, then I become his hearing with which he hears, his sight with which he sees, his hand with which he strikes, and his feet with which he walks. In this hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is describing a state where everything you do is in line with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. And it comes naturally. Because you have cleansed your heart, you have gotten to a state where you are acting upon your love. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم إنه غفور رحيم.